The studio lights burned hotter than usual, or at least that's how it felt in the moment. What began as a routine, spirited discussion quickly slid into something sharper, something raw. Charlize Theron sat poised at the table, legs crossed, posture flawless, the image of Hollywood composure. She had arrived smiling, exchanging pleasantries with the hosts, laughing easily as the cameras rolled. The segment was supposed to be simple: promote her latest project, touch briefly on activism, share a light anecdote, move on. For the first few minutes, everything followed the script. Charlize spoke thoughtfully, her voice calm and deliberate, choosing her words with care as the audience nodded along. Joy Behar leaned in with a familiar grin, tossing out questions that danced between curiosity and provocation. At first, Charlize met them head-on, responding with grace, even humor. She joked about misconceptions, clarified a few soundbites taken out of context, and tried to steer the conversation back toward substance. But Joy kept circling, reframing Charlize's answers, slipping in side comments that drew laughter from the crowd. Each time Charlize attempted to expand on her point, Joy jumped in again, cutting her off mid-sentence, reshaping the narrative before it could fully land. Charlize's smile began to change. It didn't vanish, but it tightened, stretched thin like glass under pressure. She nodded politely, eyes flicking toward Joy, then briefly toward the other hosts, as if silently asking for space to finish a thought. The audience sensed it too. Laughter became uneven, clapping hesitant. The air in the studio thickened with that unmistakable feeling that something was slipping off the rails. Joy pressed harder, questioning Charlize's stance, tossing out a sarcastic remark that earned a quick chuckle but carried a sharper edge than before. Charlize inhaled, then responded carefully, her tone still even, but now layered with restraint. She corrected the comment, explaining her position more clearly, emphasizing nuance. Yet before she could finish, Joy interrupted again, waving a hand dismissively, pivoting to another quip. That was when Charlize's eyes hardened, just a fraction, but enough to shift the entire room. She leaned forward slightly, elbows close to the table, and tried once more to speak. "If I could just finish," she began, only to be cut off yet again. A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. Someone in the front row stopped clapping mid-motion. Charlize paused, lips pressed together, then let out a quiet, audible breath. The smile was gone now, replaced by something far more honest. "I need to say this," she said, her voice still controlled but unmistakably firm. "I'm being interrupted every time I try to explain." The words landed heavier than any joke. For a split second, Joy looked surprised, then defensive, laughing it off as playful banter. But Charlize didn't laugh. She shook her head slowly, as if weighing whether to continue or let it slide. Joy attempted to move on, tossing the conversation toward another angle, but Charlize held her ground. She straightened in her chair, eyes locked forward, refusing to be redirected. The audience went quiet, that rare, tense silence where even the hum of studio equipment seems loud. Charlize spoke again, this time with more edge, explaining that conversations like this were exactly why so many voices felt minimized. Her words were measured, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. Joy interjected once more, tone sharper now, insisting she was just asking questions, just doing what the show did best. Charlize nodded, but the gesture carried no agreement. She responded calmly, pointing out that asking questions didn't require talking over answers. The exchange no longer felt like television banter. It felt personal, real, and unscripted. Around them, the co-hosts shifted in their seats, glancing between Charlize and Joy, unsure whether to intervene or let it play out. The audience leaned in, sensing they were witnessing a moment that wouldn't be edited or softened later. Charlize's voice didn't rise, but the intensity did, filling the studio with an energy that was impossible to ignore. By the time she finished her thought, the silence that followed was heavy, charged, and waiting for whatever would come next. What followed felt less like a daytime talk show segment and more like a live reckoning, unfolding without a safety net. Charlize's composure, once polished and distant, shifted into something sharper and more visceral. She wasn't shouting, wasn't slamming her hands on the table, but the intensity in her voice cut through the studio with precision. She spoke about respect, about how easily women's voices are drowned out under the guise of humor or just asking questions. Each word seemed carefully chosen, yet fueled by a frustration that had clearly been building long before she sat down at that table. Joy bristled, her smile flickering in and out as she tried to reclaim control of the moment. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and fired back that this was a talk show, that interruptions happened, that no one was being silenced. Her tone was defensive now, the joking edge replaced with irritation. Charlize listened, nodding once, but when Joy finished, she responded immediately, refusing to let the conversation be reframed again. She pointed out the difference between dialogue and domination, between exchange and dismissal. The audience reacted audibly this time, a mix of applause and sharp inhales, unsure whether to cheer or brace for what might come next. One of the co-hosts attempted to soften the tension with a light remark, but it fell flat, dissolving the moment it left her mouth. Another tried to pivot to the movie Charlize was there to promote, but Charlize gently raised a hand, signaling she wasn't finished. The cameras stayed tight on her face, catching every flicker of emotion, frustration, resolve, a flash of vulnerability. She admitted that she hadn't planned to speak this openly, but said moments like this demanded honesty, especially when they played out in front of millions. Joy interrupted again, sharper this time, questioning whether Charlize was overreacting. That was the spark. Charlize's jaw tightened, and for the first time, her voice rose, not into a shout, but into something fierce and unfiltered. She said this wasn't about one question or one interruption, but about a pattern people pretended not to see. The studio audience erupted, applause crashing against the walls, some people rising to their feet while others sat frozen, stunned by the rawness of it all. Joy tried to laugh it off, waving her hand dismissively, but the laughter didn't come this time. The energy in the room had shifted decisively. Charlize turned slightly, addressing not just Joy but the entire table, then the camera, her gaze steady and unflinching. She spoke directly to viewers at home, saying that too often, speaking up was labeled as losing control, as being dramatic, when in reality it was about drawing boundaries. Her words resonated, hanging heavy in the air. The producers' voices could faintly be heard through the host's earpieces, urging a transition, a commercial break, anything to defuse the situation. Joy glanced off camera, then back at Charlize, clearly torn between continuing the clash and moving on. When the cue cards shifted and the countdown to commercial began, Charlize pushed her chair back slowly and stood. She didn't storm off in a flurry of anger. She didn't apologize either. She simply stood there for a moment, looking around the table, then nodded once, as if to say she'd said what needed to be said. As the screen faded to commercial, the studio buzzed with nervous chatter. Audience members whispered to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling with a sense of vindication. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled, debating whether Charlize would return after the break or whether the segment had reached its natural, explosive end. Joy sat stiffly, lips pressed thin, tapping her pen against the table as if trying to ground herself. When the show returned, the energy was unmistakably different. Charlize had not returned to her seat. One of the co-hosts explained awkwardly that they were moving on, her voice strained with forced cheer. Social media, though unseen by the audience at that moment, was already erupting, clips spreading at lightning speed, opinions forming in real time. Some called it uncomfortable, others called it powerful, but no one could call it forgettable. By the end of the episode, it was clear that what had happened would live far beyond that studio. It would be replayed, dissected, debated, framed as a meltdown by some and a moment of truth by others. But for those who witnessed it live, there was no denying the electricity of it all. It wasn't just a clash between two strong personalities. It was a reminder of how quickly a polished conversation could crack, revealing something raw, unresolved, and impossible to ignore.